Barlinnie Prison, Glasgow. But it could almost be any prison anywhere. Existence is one long, tedious, unchanging routine. Every act is in response to a shout of command, and life is as drab and grey as the uniforms. But only a few yards away is a different prison within a prison. Beyond the heavy green door marked Special Unit are some very special prisoners. The 5 men kept inside this high-security unit are all convicted killers. Since they were brought from various other prisons to this unit, violence in the Scottish prison system has fallen dramatically. These are men normal prisons found to be dangerous or disruptive. There seemed no way of coping with them, a problem worsened by the fact that they could be detained for years, if not the rest of their lives.
What I done, the fights that I get with people and slash people and things like that, they were capable and did do the same thing to me, you know. And it was this sort of jungle existence, this acceptable jungle existence amongst each other, the environment, you know. It was perfectly acceptable, you know, but again, I must say that I now see it as being futile, and I now see it as I'm doing something that I never dreamt I'd ever be doing now.
You talk about the jungle existence. Many people say that dangerous animals should be locked up forever.
Just so long as they're dangerous, you know.
At 20 years old, Jimmy Boyle was already known throughout Glasgow as a Gorbals hard man. By 23, he had become one of Britain's most wanted criminals. Arrested for murder in 1967 and sentenced to life imprisonment, Boyle quickly gained a reputation as the country's most violent and notorious prisoner. He wouldn't think twice about using a razor, an iron bar, or his bare fists to slice or batter inmates, and even prison governors. But this isn't just the story of a criminal. It's a story of an unexpected transformation. Through years of violence, isolation, and reflection, Jimmy Boyle found redemption. In 1982, after 15 years inside, he was granted parole and began a new life as an acclaimed sculptor and author. He emerged as a man striving to bury his past, even as the world wouldn't let him forget it. This is the story of Jimmy Boyle, Scotland's most violent prisoner. The Glasgow underworld has never lacked its legends. In the world of fiction, there was Johnny Stark, the Razor King of No Mean City, a novel that captured the brutal landscape of pre-war Gorbals gangland. Its authors, Alexander MacArthur and H. Kingsley Long, painted a picture of a world where violence and vice were the only escapes from the harsh realities of slum life. In real life, Glasgow had its share of notorious figures, men like James Razzle Dalzell, a feared heavy so committed to his hardman image that he refused to dance with women, choosing only to dance with fellow gang members, as he considered having a boogie with the ladies to be effeminate. And then there was Dan Cronin, a street-fighting legend of the Gorbals, revered by many in the neighborhood, even by a young Jimmy Boyle, who saw Cronin as a hero, even though Cronin was gone by the time Boyle was just 6. Jimmy was born into the same rough streets of the Gorbals in 1944, a place where survival often meant toughness, and where crime was a common thread in family histories. His father, a well-known robber, died young, in his 30s, leaving behind haunting memories. One of Boyle's earliest recollections is waking up beside what he thought was a lifeless body, bandaged and blood-soaked. The figure was wrapped so tightly in layers of cloth that Boyle, just a boy, didn't know if it was his father or one of his father's friends, both often bearing the bruises of brutal encounters with rival gangsters. Boyle's mother was the steadying force in the family. A hard-working woman, she took on whatever jobs she could, cleaning Glasgow's corporation trams and later the homes of the city's bourgeoisie to keep her family afloat. In a world of grit and hardship, she was determined to give her sons a chance, even as the pull of the streets grew strong around them. Among her 4 sons, it was Jimmy who followed closest in his father's footsteps. As a young boy, he quickly graduated from stealing sweets to lifting cash from pockets. By 13, he faced his first detention after breaking into chewing gum machines. When he was sentenced, he wept, calling out for his mother. But those tears didn't last long. At just 16, Boyle was already deep into serious crime, pulling off bold thefts, including the stealing of safes. By 18, he took his violent streak to the streets, wielding a knife and slashing at innocent passers-by, quickly solidifying his reputation as someone to fear. By the time he was 20, Boyle had become a tallyman, an enforcer for ruthless moneylenders tasked with collecting unpaid debts. These lenders charged crippling interest rates, sometimes as high as 1,000%, targeting vulnerable, cash-strapped borrowers who knew that crossing Boyle came with a heavy price. By 21, Jimmy Boyle had already faced trial for murder twice. He was acquitted the first time, and charges were dropped the second, though rumors circulated that witnesses' homes had been firebombed to prevent them from testifying. Between trials, he served 2 years in prison for a brutal bottle attack that left his victim blind in one eye. After his second acquittal, Boyle still faced jail time, serving an extra 3 months for intimidating the deceased victim. By then, Boyle had become a ruthless figure in the underworld, building connections that reached as far as London's infamous Cray twins. Dubbed Babyface Boyle by the press, his feared reputation stretched beyond Scotland's borders. By 23, he was known as Scotland's most dangerous man, hiding out in London under the Cray's protection. But to understand how he went from Scotland's most dangerous to Britain's most wanted, we need to go back to July 1967. One night, after drinking in a Govan pub, Jimmy Boyle was asked to collect a debt from Babs Rooney, a small-time crook well known in Glasgow's crime scene. Rooney had missed 2 payments on a £7 debt around £150 today, and his moneylender wanted it settled. Boyle went to Rooney's flat on Cornwall Street in Kinning Park, where he was greeted by Rooney's girlfriend, Sadie Kearney. When Rooney came to the door, bare-chested and preparing for bed, Boyle demanded the money owed. But Rooney pleaded,
"Jimmy, I need more time."
Boyle allegedly then pulled out a knife and fatally stabbed Rooney in the chest. After the incident, he fled to London, finding refuge under the protection of the Crays. He'd evaded capture for 2 months, staying under the radar until September 1967 when he was having a quiet lunchtime drink with friends in the British Lion pub on Hackney Road in East London. It seemed like an ordinary day, but Boyle noticed something unusual. The pub was filled with men in overalls, supposedly local factory workers. The barman seemed on edge, and before he could piece it together, these workers sprang up, pulling guns from their pockets. They weren't workers at all. They were undercover police, and they had come to arrest one of Britain's most wanted men. Police officer Brian McLaughlin was assigned to watch over Boyle in his cell at the Central Police Station on Turnbull Street before his court appearance the next day. Reflecting on that night in his 2012 biography Crime Stopper, the now retired detective inspector recalled, "Boyle's behavior was extraordinary. He didn't sleep. Instead, he paced the cell throughout the night like a caged animal. All the while he kept his eyes firmly on me. I could see how he was capable of such violence and rage as he prowled like a big cat eager to pounce." In November 1967, Jimmy Boyle was found guilty of Babs Rooney's murder at the High Court in Glasgow, with the jury taking just 45 minutes to reach their verdict. A second man on trial, William Wilson, was acquitted of the murder charges. For the City of Glasgow police, it was a case of third time lucky, finally securing a conviction against Boyle. Before sentencing, Judge Lord Cameron condemned Boyle as a dangerous menace to society, ordering him to serve a minimum of 15 years of his life sentence before parole could even be considered. Down in the court cells, detectives involved in the Rooney investigation taunted Boyle, telling him he was finished. For them, it was a moment of victory, putting away a man they viewed as one of Glasgow's most dangerous criminals. Boyle became one of the first high-profile figures to be convicted of murder after the abolition of the death penalty in 1965. Though he protested his innocence, few believed he wasn't involved in Rooney's murder. Boyle later claimed that it was his friend who had actually killed Rooney, alleging that the bloodied knife used in the murder mysteriously appeared in his flat during a police search after he had left the scene. Despite his claims, Boyle had never revealed the identity of this friend. Several witnesses who testified against Boyle required police protection following the trial, as fears of retribution loomed large. The intimidation didn't end there. 3 men, including lawyer James Latta, were convicted of attempting to intimidate witnesses and received lengthy prison sentences for their actions. Boyle's propensity for violence only grew behind bars, becoming a serious threat to the prison system itself. Just 2 months into his sentence, he was accused of an assault on the assistant governor at Barlinnie, breaking a bone in the man's face, an act that earned him an additional 18 months. In October 1968, he was found guilty of assaulting 2 officers at Peterhead Prison, resulting in another 4 years added to his term. By June 1970, Boyle was involved in a riot at Porterfield Prison in Inverness, attacking 2 officers and even the governor, which cost him an extra 6 months. His most violent outburst came in May 1973, when he led another riot at Porterfield, resulting in a charge of attempted murder against 6 officers and an extended sentence of 6 years. Boyle's relentless aggression made him one of the most feared and challenging inmates in the Scottish prison system. His rage against the authorities became a personal war, a relentless battle of wits with prison wardens and governors. He tore apart one cell wall with his bare hands, destroyed a padded cell, and endured countless beatings, often while strapped into a straitjacket. Spending years in punishment blocks, silent cells, and solitary confinement pushed him to the edge of sanity, leaving him barely able to communicate at times. During a prolonged period locked inside a cage within a solitary cell, he became utterly animalized, enduring food contaminated with spit and filth, even rubbing himself with his own feces to fend off the brutal beatings that came whenever he defied authority. Barlinnie Prison destroyed me, but it also made me a better person. Every cell they put me into, I broke up, I tore down, and I got another sentence. When I continued to rebel, they then put me in what was called a silent cell. They would come in and beat me. All you've got is a plastic pot, so I did what you do in the pot and I covered myself, and when they opened the door, I just ran at them. The 3 of them just slammed the door. Every time I went to the toilet, I was sort of rearming myself. There was this war of attrition. They didn't know that I was fearless. Boyle's impact on the prison system was so profound that by the early 1970s, it was clear he couldn't be controlled by traditional methods. He was transferred to the notorious cages at Porterfield Prison in Inverness, a concrete cell with no furniture, just a block to sleep on. Stripped naked and given only a blanket, a list of rules on the wall stated no prisoner should remain there for more than 6 months. Boyle, however, would spend 4.5 years in that cage. He recalled persuading a corrupt officer to smuggle in knives, which he passed to other inmates in the bathroom. During the ensuing attack, Jimmy was knocked unconscious and taken to the hospital. Despite a medic's warning that he should stay overnight due to fears for his life, the guards took him back to his cage. He later woke covered in blood, with nearly 50 stitches in his head. It was during this time that he first discovered a love for literature, thanks to sympathetic prison officers who would bring him a new book each week. Ironically, the first book he read was Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. With Boyle's relentless cycle of violence, it was clear something needed to change. He became one of the first inmates transferred to the experimental and controversial special unit at Barlinnie Prison. In this unique setting, prisoners were encouraged to explore their artistic abilities and begin the process of rehabilitation under a more relaxed regime. He quickly discovered a talent for sculpture, creating Gulliver, the largest concrete sculpture in Europe, for the Craig Miller Festival Society in 1976. A year later, he published his autobiography, A Sense of Freedom, written behind bars. The book became a bestseller, detailing his life of crime, murder conviction, and eventual path to rehabilitation within the special unit. By this time, Boyle had transformed from a violent street enforcer into a charismatic and articulate artist, even baking his own bread. In 1978, still serving his sentence, he met and later married Sarah Trevelyan, a psychiatrist from a public school background who was drawn to visit him after reading his autobiography. Her father, John Trevelyan, a prominent figure in British society, was the secretary of the British Board of Film Censors. Even as he neared release, Boyle's fear of being set up by prison guards never faded. He would search his cell meticulously, even for something as small as a sewing needle. Over the years, he claimed to have found planted items, including prison keys, a hacksaw, and, after returning from a short time in the community, even a wrap of cocaine and tin foil. Another inmate had tipped him off about the setup. He believes that some within the prison system resented his rehabilitation because he had done it without finding religion, without losing his dignity or integrity, and without grassing anyone up. They saw it as me beating the system. To this day, he contends that Barlinnie's special unit was ultimately scrapped because, in his words, they didn't want another Jimmy Boyle. A film adaptation of Boyle's autobiography, A Sense of Freedom, was released to critical acclaim. with David Heyman delivering a powerful performance as Boyle. The film even received a BAFTA nomination. However, due to the Scottish authorities' refusal to cooperate, the intense prison scenes had to be filmed in a Dublin jail instead. After his release in 1982, he settled down with his wife Sarah in Edinburgh's Inverleith area, where they started a family and had 2 children. Speaking to the press just hours after his release, Boyle said, "It's too easy to say I'm sorry. I think the public are sick to death with that sort of thing. I'm not trying to run away from it. But I think people want you to stand by your behavior now. Most of my victims were people involved in crime, and that's part of my life. I just want to forget." His words signaled a man ready to leave his violent past behind and focus on his future. But even as Jimmy was building a new life, his violent past resurfaced with a tragic reminder in 1994. That year, his first son, James Boyle Jr., was stabbed to death by Gary Moore, a notorious Glasgow criminal, in the Oatlands area of Glasgow. Moore had previously been a suspect in several high-profile cases, including the 1984 murders of 6 members of the Doyle family and the 1991 death of a sex worker. At the time of his death, James Jr., then 27, had served 3 years for robbery and struggled with heroin addiction. Moore, who has since passed away, was later convicted of culpable homicide and sentenced to 8 years for the killing. James and his younger sister Patricia were born from Boyle's relationship with waitress Margaret Kinnear in the 1960s, whom he met after serving a prison term for a violent bottle attack. Both children were born while Boyle was behind bars, and he had minimal contact with them until his transfer to the special unit in the early 1970s. Over the years, Jimmy Boyle has rarely spoken publicly about his turbulent past and the murder conviction that defined much of his early life. In his autobiography, A Sense of Freedom, Boyle described an argument with Babs Rooney, during which he admitted to slashing Rooney in the chest. He wrote, "I haven't been as forthcoming with the circumstances of Babs Rooney's death as I've been on earlier incidents in the book. The reason for this is that, although I maintain I never killed him, I did slash him. Therefore, by law, I am technically guilty of his murder." However, in 2016, Jimmy released a revised version of his best-selling autobiography, where he shifted the blame for Babs Rooney's murder onto his former co-accused, William Wilson, who had since passed away. Boyle wrote, "The truth is, Babs Rooney was killed by my co-accused William Wilson. The whole dynamics of this sum up the world where I once lived. I kept strictly to the no grassing rule. I put myself away for 15 years for the gangster badge of honor that I wasn't a grass." He explained that they'd made a pact. Whichever one of them was acquitted would later take responsibility for the crime. But under double jeopardy laws of the time, they couldn't be tried twice, and no one listened to Wilson's confession.
What do you today think of the man that you were 15 years ago?
I think that it's a terrible waste of a human being and the potential that he has. You know, I'm just sad that I had to come through everything in order to be where I am today. But maybe that's something that had to come through in order for other people to learn from it. And the fact that I'm able to articulate some of the experience, or able to speak about it, or give people a better understanding. Because what I believe is that through that knowledge and through that experience that we can all learn from it.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed Boyle's complex legacy of violence and creative rebirth, don't forget to like this video and let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you found his story intriguing, don't forget to subscribe to Dark Sleuth Secrets for more deep dives into the lives of extraordinary, controversial figures. And until next time, stay curious and keep sleuthing.